Hello and welcome. In this video, I will show you how to create a button with HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I will show you how to create a push button and how to create the material UI button. So let's get started. So to get started, I've opened up our project in Visual Studio Code and I'm going to create the files that we will be using. I'm going to create a index.html, the CSS folder and the JavaScript folder. In the CSS, I'm going to say styles.css, and in JavaScript we'll have one main.js file, and then I'm going to get the boilerplate for the HTML file. So to get started, I'm going to add the doc type HTML, and I'm going to create an HTML tag with inside a head tag, and we will be linking our style sheet right here. So I'm going to say link, which will have a rel of style sheet, and then an href of /css/styles.css, like this. And we also want to include our JavaScript, like this. And we say script source is /js/main.js, like so. And I also want to import the Roboto front from the Google API. So I import it like this as another style sheet, and then we're good to go. So to get started, I'm going to create a div right here, which will contain the push button, and another div for our material UI button. So these are the two buttons that we will be creating, and I'm going to give this one a class name of push button, and then I'm going to create the styles for it. So before we are going to apply styles to it, I want to make a couple of variables, a primary color, and I want that to be a blue color since we will be using that. So I'm going to use the color picker, and I'm going to say that we want something like this, I think. Then we want a primary color light, like so, and then I want to make it a little bit lighter, so maybe something like that. And then last but not least, our primary color dark, and then we want to make it a little bit darker than a normal color, like so. So now we can use those variables in our style sheet. So before we are going to get started, I'm going to open up the browser and I'm going to navigate to our index.html so we can actually see what is happening inside our project. So this is what we have at the moment. As we can see, we have the text push button and material UI button, and they are being represented right here. I'm going to change this to material button so it matches the length of the other one a little bit more. And I'm going to get started to first center the buttons so it will look a little bit nicer. I'm going to say body display flex, a height of 100% view height. I don't want any margin on the body, and I want to say justify content center and align item center. So what this does is we now have our item centered, and I want to remove the class because it's an object. Good, so now the body is good styled, and we want to style the children of the body as well. So I want to say that the children will have a margin of 25 pixels horizontally. So as we can see, they are now spaced out 25 pixels horizontally. So to style our buttons, I'm going to open up the styles, and I'm going to say that we are targeting the push button. So I'm going to say push button, and I want to say that we have a font family of Roboto and a fallback of sans serif, like so. And I have to add a column right here. So right now we use the font family Roboto for the push button. It's good. And I also want to change the background color of this button. So I'm going to say background color, and here we can use our variable primary color. So if we refresh the page, we will see our primary color appearing on the button. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little padding to the button, like so. I'm going to say vertically 8 pixels and horizontally 16 pixels, something like that. And I also want to make the text color white, because otherwise we cannot see the text inside of the button. Next, I want to give a little bit of border radius to the button, so border radius of 10 pixels, like so. And then I want to make the text a little bit more heavy. So to do that, I'm going to say font weight, and I'm going to say 500. Yes. So now it looks more prominent on the button. So next up, I want to create a border at the bottom of the button. So I'm going to say border bottom, which will be 6 pixels solid, and then we want to use our color that we have created. So I'm going to say primary color and then dark. And if we refresh our page, we will see the border appearing at the bottom. And then I want to make the button a little bit lighter when we hover over it. And at the moment when we hover over it, we also see a normal cursor. We want that to be a pointer. So I'm going to say push button, hover, and I'm going to say background color, and then var primary color light, and cursor pointer, like so. And if we refresh it, we will see that our button changes color and that our cursor changes to a pointer. Next up, I want to make the text non-selectable. So as you can see, we can select the text on the button. That's not what we want. So I'm going to add the user select to none right here. So now the user cannot select anything on this element. And if we refresh the page, we will see that we are not able to select the push button anymore. So this is a really good start. And we're now going to apply the styling to the button when we press on it. So to select the pressed button, I'm going to say push button active. This will apply the styles when we are pressing the button. And then I want to say that the button will have a top of 6 pixels. So I'm going to say top 6 pixels. And if we refresh, we'll see nothing happening. That is because we didn't add a position to our button. So if we say position relative, it will render everything relative to the div that it contains. So if we refresh it right now, we'll see that the button moves 6 pixels from the top relative to its original position. So that's really good. We now want to remove the border at the bottom. So I'm going to say border bottom 0 or none, like so. And now our border bottom is gone. And to finish it off, I want to add a margin to the bottom. So right now our button is going all over the place. He's going places, but we don't want that. What we do want is that it stays in place. So I'm going to say margin bottom of 6 pixels. And if we refresh the page, we will see that the button stays nicely in place. And we have finished our first button. This is the push button. So next up is the material button. This button is a little bit more complicated because we are going to have to apply some JavaScript to it for the ripple effect. And I'm going to get started on it. I'm going to say that we want a class of material UI or material button, like so. And then I want to create a class for it. So I'm going to say .material button, and then I say the same as in the push button. And I'm going to say font weight of 500. I also want to use the font family Roboto, so we are going to copy that over as well. I want to give it a color of white. I want to give it a background color of primary color, so I'm just going to copy that over as well. We are also going to use this padding, and we are not going to use the same border radius. Instead, I will say a border radius of 3 pixels and a user select of none. So that is what we are also going to keep, like so. And now we have the start of our material button. But as we could see, we did copy a lot of things over from the push button. So I think I'm going to create a general class button, which will contain most of the default styles. So I'm going to say button, and I'm going to copy over everything that we are reusing. So that is this, and the user select none. So now we can remove that from here. I can delete this and delete the user select and remove it from here as well. So that is everything what we had except for the border radius, like so. And now both buttons will use this styling, which is a lot more clean. And if we refresh the page, nothing has happened, but the code is a lot more cleaner. So next up, I'm going to add some box shadow to our material button. And I'm going to do that by saying box shadow, And then we have to say the offset from the left, which is 0 pixels. Offset from the top, we will give it 2 pixels. And then we want to give the blurriness, which will be 1 pixel. And then we want the size of the shadow, which will be, I think, 4 pixels. And the color, which will be 0, 0, 0, 0.2. And if we refresh the page, we will see a little shadow over it, but it is not exactly what I want. So I think I messed up the styling. So I'm going to create a little bit more blurriness, like so. And I want it to be a little bit small, so 2 pixels, I think. Yes, that looks a lot better. I then want to, when we hover over it, increase our box shadow. So to do that, I'm going to say material button, hover, box shadow, and then we want to give it more offset of the top. So I'm going to say 3 pixels, and as you can see, if we hover over it, it will give a little bit more shadow on the bottom. So maybe that's not enough, but I think it is enough. So the last thing to do is when we click on the button, we want the shadow to become even larger. So to do that, I'm going to say active, because that is when we click on it. Then we want a top margin of 6 pixels. So when we refresh the page, it becomes a little bit bigger and then a lot bigger, as you can see. So these two values, this is the blurriness and this is the size of the shadow. So if we create, for example, 20 pixels, we'll get a lot of shadow, which is not what we want. And if we increase the blurriness, it will get a little bit faded out, which looks a lot nicer, I think. But since we don't need such a big shadow, we will stay with this. And this looks really good, I think. To add the cursor effect, I'm going to also say when we hover over it, we want the cursor of pointer. And I'm going to save that as well. And now we have a little nice pointer over it. So this is for the material button. The next thing we are going to apply to it is the ripple effect, which will be done in JavaScript. So before I'm going to apply the ripple, I'm first going to add the background color on the hover. So I want it to be a little bit darker, just like with the push button. And I'm going to say background color and then for primary color dark, and then save it. And if you refresh the page, we will see that the material button now gets darker when we hover over it. So to get started on the JavaScript, I'm going to open up our main.js and I'm going to add an event listener to the window. I'm going to window.add event listener and then load. And then I'm going to create this function which will log if the window has loaded. So I'm going to say window has loaded, and if we save this and open up our console and refresh the page, yes, we will see our console.log in the console. So that is really good. Our JavaScript is working. What I want to do now is grab all the material buttons, and to do so I'm going to add a special class to it. I'm going to say every button that has a ripple will have the ripple effect. So what I can do now is I can say I want a function add ripple listeners, and I'm going to execute that function when we loaded the window, add ripple listeners, and I'm going to get all the elements by saying this const buttons equals document.get elements by class name, and the class name we just created is ripple. So every element with the class name ripple will be inside of this variable, and to verify that I'm just going to console.log the buttons. And if we refresh the page, we will see a HTML collection which contains one button, the button we have right here. So that's really good. And now I want to loop through each button. So I'm going to say for let I is 0, I smaller than buttons.length, I plus plus. And I can target a single button by saying buttons I. And I want to add an event listener to them. So I'm going to say buttons I dot add event listener, and I want to create a ripple event. So I'm going to say function ripple event, and then I'm going to say that we want to execute this event when we click on the button. So this will get an event, and here we have the click event or the mouse down event. and then I want to say the ripple event will get executed. So what I did here was create a loop which loops through every button that we find with the class name ripple, and we select the current button with the variable I, and then we add an event listener to it, and we check if the mouse is down, and if the mouse is down we will execute the ripple event, which is this one. And to confirm that this is working, I'm just going to console log pressing on the button, and if we open up the window and we refresh the page, we will see that we are getting the console.log, so that is working. So I also want the element that we are clicking on. So to get the element, I'm going to say const button equals e.current_target. So now we get the target of the event, and then I can console.log the button, and we will see our button appearing inside of the browser right here. So this is the div which already is selected, so that's good. And in order to make the ripple appear from the mouse, I'm going to need the location of the mouse inside of the button. So to calculate that, I'm going to say const x equals e.pagex. So this is the x location of the mouse on the web page, and I'm going to say that I want to subtract the button dot offset left from it, and I want to do the same for the y location. So I'm going to say y equals e.pagey minus button offset and then top, and then I want to console.log the x and the y. And if we save this and refresh the page, we'll see that if we click on the top left corner, we'll get a really low number because it's like 0, 0. And if we click on the bottom right, we get the highest number possible inside of the button, which is 170 and 28. So this is working. We now have the location of the mouse. So next I want to create the duration of the animation that we are going to create. So I'm going to say const duration equals 350. And then I also want to create two variables, one for the animation frame and the other one for the animation start, like so. And then I want to create a function which will get executed each time we will run an animation frame. So this function will be called animation step, and it will get a timestamp like so. And then we can close the function. And at the end of the ripple event, I want to say that the animation frame equals window.request animation frame, and I want to put the request inside our function like so. And then I want to console.log the timestamp right here. And if I save this and refresh the page, I will see the timestamp appearing once, like so. And the reason it is appearing once is because we only execute the request animation frame one time. So how this works is each time we request an animation frame, it will execute this function. And right now we request the animation frame one time, which is right here. So it will only execute the animation step one time. So in order for us to get the animation to work, I want to get the value of the initial timestamp. So I will save that in the animation start, and I'm going to say if animation start is not defined. So I'm going to do that by putting an exclamation mark at the front. I want to say that our animation start equals the timestamp. So then it will be set. So this will only execute once. So then I want to create a variable frame, and I want to say that is equal to the timestamp minus the animation start. So this will contain a value of the duration of the animation, and then we want to check if this duration is greater than our initial duration. So to do that, I'm going to say if frame is smaller than duration. So if the frame has not yet reached the duration time, we can just continue our animation. And if the frame is exceeding our duration, so if we are playing the animation longer than we want to stop the animation. So right here I'm going to say that we want to say window.cancel animation frame, and then we have to give the animation frame we want to cancel, which is this one, and then it will cancel our animation. But if we do have our animation, we want to get a new animation frame. So I'm going to say animation frame equals window dot request animation frame, and then we want to pass the function again, animation step, like so. And if we save this and console the timestamp, we will see that our timestamp is being executed something like 350 times or something. I'll just refresh this, and not 350 times, a lot less. But as you can see, it only executes a couple of times and then it stops, because then we have exited our duration. So to get a good view on this, I'm going to load the frame, so we can see on what frame we actually are, like so. And when we press, we can see that it has 360 frames. That's correct, because if it exceeds 350, it will stop. So after this one, which is bigger than 350, it will stop and call the cancel animation frame. So to create our ripple effect, I'm going to create an easing variable, and in that variable we will save the percentage that the ripple has to show. So I'm going to say easing equals frame divided by duration. So if we are at the end, it will equal 1, and if we are at the beginning, it will equal 0.1 or 0.2. And then I want to console.log this easing, so we can see what is happening. And if we refresh it, we'll see that it is mapping the frame rate to a value between 0 and 1, so that's really good. So to create the actual ripple, I'm going to target the style of the button. I'm going to use the background image, and I'm going to use special quotes so I can type variables inside of them. And I want to make a radial gradient, and I want to say that I want to have a circle at a custom location, which will be our x in pixels, and then our y like this, in pixels, like so. So then I have to give two colors. The first color will be the color that we want to initially have, and the second color will be the color that we'll transition into. So to give an example, I'm going to say first black, and then for the second color transparent, and I'm going to save it. And right now, as you can see, our button is from the point where we click black, and it transitions over into the transparent color, which is the normal color. But we don't want to have black and transparent. I want to use an RGBA color, which will be 0.2. And if we look at it now, we can see that it is a little bit more faded out. Maybe make it a little bit darker. So that looks really good. But now I want to make this transition create an animation, so it will get bigger and then fade itself out. So to make this transition, I'm going to use our easing variable, and I'm going to say that we want, instead of 0.7% alpha, I'm going to say that we want a base of 0.4, and we are going to use the easing right here, 1 minus easing. So the bigger our easing is, the smaller our variable right here will be, so the less we will see this opacity layer. And then I have to give a percentage which will fill the overlaying element. So I'm going to say this 90 times easing, and I'm going to say percentage, and I'm going to say the same for the transparent layer. I'm going to say 90 times easing, and then at the end percentage. And if I save this and refresh the page, we will see that the ripple effect starts initially a little bit dark, but then flows out lighter. So I'm just going to remove the comments right now, so the console log, and I'm going to create the initial ripple a little bit darker. So I'm going to say 0.6, and right now we have our ripple effect. Maybe make it a little bit lighter, like so. And now we have created a material UI button with a ripple effect, and when the ripple effect is ended, it will cancel the animation frame, so we won't have any performance leaks. So that is really good. Oh, and one thing I forgot is that we have to remove the radial gradient from our button when the animation is finished. So that is right here. When the animation is finished, I'm going to say button.style.backgroundImage equals none. So right now, if we open up our inspector and we look at our button, we will see this radial gradient. So if we refresh the page, we will see nothing anymore. And when we press on it, it will have a background image of gradient, as you saw. And when we finish it, it will just say background image none. So that looks a lot cleaner. Otherwise, you'll be left with a radial gradient, which you don't want. So what we have created is a push button, which you can press to activate, and we have the material button, which you can press to make the ripple effect. So that's really cool. I hope you have learned something, and I hope you could follow along. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.